All right, says we're live. Okay. Sorry about that technical hiccup on our end. Of course, I had a client call me just as we went live. That's how it typically happens anyway. So with that, welcome to another episode of the Reputation Igniter podcast. Something new and unique is we're actually streaming it live, and I have to thank Tony for that. And so as we're jumping in here, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, make sure that you don't miss a single episode that we drop. We are always trying to make an impact and positively help you as a business owner of an HVAC company, whether it's residential or commercial, just do better in your space. And so that's why I brought Tony on. So Tony, first of all, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I appreciate it.
Of course. And the reason I brought Tony on here is a multitude of reasons. But first and foremost, the reason we have this podcast is that my goal here in the HVAC industry is to make the greatest barrier to entry into our profession is the level of professionalism with which you have to execute your business to be a proud member serving our communities at large here in North America. And so our hope is to bring on leading experts like Tony to come and share a little bit about their zone of genius on what they're doing in the HVAC space, how it's impacting it, and how you can duplicate and replicate those sorts of efforts. That being said, my favorite guests to have on this, not that I don't like Tony, Tony's an awesome dude, as you will soon learn, is that we'd like to have HVAC owners on, because you telling your success stories of being in the field, on the front lines, actually implementing these types of, operations, insights, pricing strategies, you name it. There's so much I learned from so many of you each and every time we have you on the show as a guest. And so those are the people that I'm always looking for. And anybody that's on this podcast is by referral only. So these are not just random people. These are people that have been from my network, curated, cultivated, and suggested to bring on. And so that's why I'm super excited to talk to Tony here, because we're going to dive into social media for your HVAC business. And, Tony has a unique approach. He's actually doing this a lot for commercial enterprises, but also for residential. And I'm excited because I think a lot of people take a lot of approaches and there's a lot of dismissiveness that comes in this sort of industry. But I think if you do it tactfully and you do it strategically, it can be very, very important to your business. And so with that, let's jump in. Tony, real quick, though, before we jump into all the fun stuff, right? Would you mind just taking 5 minutes and maybe just kind of giving us a here to there story? How did you get into the HVAC business? What have you been doing since you've been here? And where are you right now? And how are you making an impact?
Great. Again, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And this is a exciting one for me to do because a lot of discussions we do are technical in nature regarding HVAC sciences, but I love the social media aspect of this. So this is really cool. So thank you for inviting me. So I got, I got familiar with HVAC because my dad was a residential HVAC contractor, and we lived down in Tampa in Florida, and that's where we kind of grew up. And, when I was a teenager, I went on a few jobs with my dad installing air handlers in attics in Florida over the summer. And I immediately thought, well, maybe this college thing, I'll check that out. Like, it is hot in the attics in Florida, but I had a great time. I learned a ton with my dad. So that's how I kind of became acquainted with air conditioning, and really didn't have any desire to go into the HVAC business. But then I went to college. I ended up getting an engineering degree just because I liked math and sciences and stuff like that. And I knew I wanted to go into sales. So I ended up going into HVAC sales because of my father, kind of, like the story I just told you. So I went into HVAC sales with a big manufacturer for 10 years. And then I left there and had a private rep firm that I was part owner of, and sales manager and sales engineer there. And this is all commercial HVAC sales. And then I left there about 5 years ago, came to work where I'm at now, which is in Asheville, North Carolina, for Insight Partners, which is a commercial HVAC rep firm. I've been primarily a sales engineer, account executive my whole life, but the last 3 years, or since COVID, I guess that's about 4 years, has been in the marketing area. So I handle all the marketing for Insight Partners and another rep firm called Hobbs and Associates. So
awesome. Well, thanks, Tony, for that quick little intro of yourself, just so we get a sense of like the experience that you've had and why we should be listening to you. So let's kind of jump in. Let's maybe kind of like, before we get into the weeds, let's kind of like zoom out, right? A lot of these guys, there's so much stuff that you could be spending, investing your money, your time, like all your resources, your manpower into in your business to grow your business, right? I think, especially my audience is usually kind of maybe running a little bit from fire to fire, just trying to put stuff out, right? So something like social media can sometimes feel like a nice to have, as opposed to like an essential piece to the overall sort of brand awareness, sort of process for building a good brand and a good, strong company for years to come. So why do you think, or why do you feel, or why do you advocate for social media being a piece of that puzzle? And where is really, how should one look at it from the whole when they're approaching it in terms of the value that it can bring to the business?
It's such a great question, and it's so hard to answer because there's
I
so
know.
much to do online. But
Yeah.
I would say, like, kind of starting, I'm trying to think of it from the top down. And I know, especially if you're a residential contractor and you're a 1 or 2 man show, it is hard to find the time to do this stuff. Like, it takes a lot of time. You've got to learn it. It's not easy. So I got a lot of sympathy for the guy who, is running hard like that, or even commercial guys who have a small, even if you got a couple men and you're running in trucks, it's just so difficult to find that. But it is so super important. And I guess what I would say to someone looking at this is, it's better to have nothing than to have stuff that doesn't promote your brand very well, right? Like, you don't want to be on TikTok with a lot of bad stuff. And I see it all the time. I see it often. Or your employees are out there and they got your shirt on and they're cussing and they're doing things. They're talking about, overcharging to replace a therm, stuff that's not very, it's not going to make your brand look good. So I would start with that. Like, are you hurting yourself online would kind of be the first thing I would say, I guess, if I was talking to somebody. If you are, clean that up. And then, just look for ways to start slow. Hiring someone to build a website today is not as expensive as it used to be. And, services like you offer with the Google reviews are extremely important. But, just start there. And I would say get a firm, you don't have to have a big elaborate website. You could have a 2 or 3 page website that talks a little bit about you, your testimonials, maybe link to some Google reviews or something like that. And then how to contact us, the very basic, it looks clean. And then the social media side, I don't know if you want to get into that right now, but that's a whole other side of it that I think is extremely powerful. And, some people just have an Instagram page.
Yeah.
They don't have a website and they put all their stuff on Instagram and it looks good. So,
yeah. Well, let's talk about maybe the guy that is, has obviously maybe 1 or 2 vans beyond themselves, right? Like, let's start kind of there. If they're just kind of getting started, is there a certain platform that you would recommend that you're seeing more effective? Is that Facebook? Is that LinkedIn? Is that, TikTok or Instagram, right? And maybe with that being said, what is the simplest way? I don't want to say easy because it ain't easy, right? But what is the simplest way to maybe kind of get started to kind of build that brand, or at least build that trust, that familiarity with you and your brand through one of these channels?
Well, the good news today is we all have this, I'm going to grab my phone here, this mobile content generating machine in our hands. And it's so super powerful. And there's millions of people sitting there going like this, waiting to see it. So, I kind of look at it very simple, like where, I would say, where is the attention today is the first thing I would look at. And attention is our greatest asset. And this, you have a podcast, you're trying to get out there and stuff too. And it's like, I'm totally agnostic. And I know a lot of people are like, TikTok, I don't want to be on it. Instagram, I can care less. Like, I'm all about building our brand in a way that looks professional, looks good. I want to go where the attention is, right? That's already, if it was in billboards and white pages, I'd be screaming, let's do more. Let's get in the white page, let's get in the newspaper. Newspaper is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
But, it's just not there anymore. That's not where the attention is. It's all online, sending out mailers and stuff like that. When I first started in this business, someone about 5 years ago was like, we need to send out some mailers. And I'm like, you mean like paper, like a mail, like an envelope? I was confused what they were talking about. But anyway, so, what I'm trying to say is, like, the attention's on the social media, and there's something on social media called organic reach, which is super, super important, right? Like, this. So some platforms, you post stuff, 50 people see it. Maybe Facebook's a good example of that. You might post that same thing on LinkedIn and you might have 2,000 people see it the first time you post it, or TikTok. So the organic reach on LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts is really strong right now. There's more consumers than there is content. So that's the important thing. I would say like one of the things that I really wish I was around more is the equipment and the job sites. Like I'm in an office, I'm not around it. If I was on a job site, I would have trouble doing my job because I would be wanting to create so much content. And you could just, if you watch people on LinkedIn or TikTok or YouTube, just see what they're doing. And they're doing very simple stuff. Hey, I'm out here. Here's a unit. We see this problem often. Here's how we correct it, et cetera. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think, one of the things you're saying is like, hey, what's the power of having a phone, right? And using and realizing that, I think, and some people might still be stuck in this is like, oh, I've got to have these professional videos. I got to hire a videographer, or I got to spend money on editing. And they're thinking like, oh, I'm gonna spend, $1,500 to $3,000 a month just to produce like 3 videos. And it's like today's like people like, I think we had this conversation, before is like, that content is valuable and it has its place, right? But really what people want to see is that you're real, you're human, you're somebody that, you're not some giant faceless corporation, but instead you're a humble business owner. And sometimes this can be your techs that are out there, provided you know that they're not going to swear and they're not going to talk about overcharging the client or whatever these things. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, there's a lot of places that you could stumble for sure.
Yeah.
But the power of using your phone just to talk about things that makes you relatable, makes them feel like, well, shoot, these guys are, in houses in my neighborhood. Clear, like you wouldn't put something online if you were doing something shady anyways, because people would see that and that's going to go viral in a negative way, right? So the power of using that phone as a device to just kind of document more so than anything, kind of that Gary V mentality, right? Of like, instead of creating content, just document, right? Because I think that's where a lot of people will relate, and they'll feel like they understand you. They'll understand at least your thought process and stuff. And that's way more than they'd ever read or trust on a website, is watching you actually, process through, maybe a trouble call or something like that. Would you say it's a fair assessment and one of the better tools to use right now?
100%. I have this conversation often with, we represent a lot of world-class manufacturers, and a lot of them are very good at marketing, extremely good at marketing. They have videos that look amazing. They look great on their website. They look great in the boardroom. They look great at the trade shows. They don't do well on social media. You could spend $20,000 on a production, put it up on social media, and it'll flop. And you could do the same content on your phone for free, and you could have 40,000 people see it. Literally, like that's not an exception. That's common to happen if the content's good. And I think what you said, you nail it. Like I would love to see. I've seen this before where the guy's on the job site finishes an install and he asks the owner, "Hey, I have this TikTok thing. Would you mind saying a few words about it? Or do you just mind if I take a few before and after pictures or whatever and post them?" I mean, that content is solid. Like it's huge, right? Like you're at the customer, even if you get the customer on there, if they're comfortable with that, fine. If not, whatever you could post. But yeah, so the production stuff is, I tell people all the time, you don't need a script. You don't need a lighting professional. You don't need a camera crew. You got it all right here. You have everything you need right here. So,
well, I think you bring up another great, I mean, not just the investment of like, say you get those three videos for $3,000 and like you get 12 views in total, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, what am I spending? But to your point, I was just thinking about is like you're inadvertently creating video testimonials, right? Like it's one thing to get reviews, and that's important, obviously, from a search standpoint and a conversion standpoint, all that kind of stuff. But people coming across an actual testimonial about somebody, like, and they don't even necessarily know them per se, right? But seeing the like, oh, this is an elderly lady, and she obviously trusts these guys. They came over. I think that that like there's things that you can't even say that will convey, right? And it'll just almost strike them at an emotional standpoint. I think the other piece is I'm thinking about this more is number one, you're also giving exposure to you and your team, right? So say somebody watches a video and then, Steve or Andrea shows up at the house and she's the technician, right? They're going to immediately feel like, oh, well, I already know you. Yeah, come on in, right? And there's not this standoffishness, because that's what I feel like I'm always trying to address with my clients through obviously different trust signals that you can kind of create through your digital marketing. But like a video just like breaks all those barriers down immediately, right? And then, the last thing I would say, and I just thought about this as you were kind of talking about that, is on top, it also gives your techs buy-in to your business, because they're like, well, I'm kind of part of this media machine, right? And I think that's where us millennials, we want to feel a part of something bigger than ourselves. So that's an easy way to kind of like jump in there as well, right?
100%. And I love that you brought up I call it the byproduct of, you have this core purpose of marketing, right? Like when we started during COVID. That's how Insight Partners got started with our online journey. We wanted to reach more, wanted to make sure we stayed in front of our customers, mechanical engineers, mechanical contractors, and building owners.
Yeah.
So we started doing Zoom, which you remember when that happened, like everyone was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. It'll be 300-400 people on there that and a tank. People got sick of it. So we started doing LinkedIn Lives. Actually, what we're doing right now, we started when that came out. I was like, oh my gosh, let's try this. So, terrifying. That's another thing we should talk about, is getting over the fear of doing this, which is a big thing that rarely gets talked about. But I'd love to talk about that too in a minute. But so when we started it, we're thinking, okay, well, we'll get to reach our customers, our mechanical engineers. But the byproduct of doing this well and doing it right, or doing it, I shouldn't say well, doing it real, like when you're real online, like you were mentioning, is other people see it. Like your vendors will see it. The people you have a business partnership with, if you're a rep for a specific, oh, he's out there, he's promoting our brand. That's great. Or maybe a brand you want to promote that sees you and say, hey, I like what you're doing. You want to sell our product? We'll give you training. Or people might want to come work for you. Hey, I see this guy all the time. I'm going to call him for a job. I mean, there's all kinds of things. And like you said, the employees for you, if you're showcasing them, talking great about them, telling them people love to hear that. Like I like to hear it, I'm online all the time and I still like when someone's, oh, Tony did a great job. Oh, thanks. So, people, there's all these byproducts of doing it that you don't really realize when you start, or at least we didn't realize it when we started. So yeah.
Well, I mean, and like to your point, I think those byproducts are so intangible, right? That it's hard to put a metric on them, right? At a certain level, you just kind of got to trust that it's the right thing to do, for your business and for the community in that regard, right? So I love that, right? And like you said, there's implications that you wouldn't even be able to fathom right now, and you won't until 6 years later when you look back and you go, oh shoot, like that all happened because of XYZ. So let's just jump into that though. You were just talking about the fear, right? And I would totally agree, right? A lot of us owners, right? And I always call myself a recovering engineer, because that's what I did before I started my marketing company, 11 years ago. Is like, dude, I thought I was a people person, right? But I was a people person amongst engineers, right? So I got into a business setting and started networking through like BNI, and I just realized how big the gap really was. And then that was just to connect and network, right? Then to learn how to do sales was a whole nother journey in and of itself, right? So it's like, what you see now is not how I showed up in my first BNI meeting, right? And it's just a process of kind of getting through that, right? Yep. So let's say, because I would say a lot of, the owners right now are probably baby boomers, right? I mean, there are quite a few of our generation that are taking on and taking over these businesses, which is great. We've also got a lot of young people who, are techs, and they're just hungry for it and they launch early. But let's talk about the fear. I would say that, most of us millennials were born with a phone in our hand, although I didn't really get one until high school, and the smartphone didn't come out till I was in college, if that dates me. But how would you say, or what would you recommend for maybe somebody who's maybe more of that boomer, or maybe they're just a little bit introverted and still young, but understand the technology? What are the tools? What would you say is the process to kind of get over that fear and really start to leverage this mode of communication, if you will?
So I'm a good one to talk about this, because when I was in college, they just started the World Wide Web. If anyone even knows what that is, that's what the WWW stands for, right, by the way. So I think I'm following the Gen X category, but yeah. So I don't know, the fear of like the technology. I don't know if it's, here's my theory. I don't know for sure. Yeah. I don't think it's actually the technology that scares people. Okay. It's what's my wife going to think? What's my friend from high school going to think that I hadn't seen in 20 years? What's my ex-girlfriend? There's all these insecurities that run through our brain. Like, oh, I'll when I lose weight, I'll do it. Or when I do this, it's just like, I don't know. I'm speaking from my experience. Like I was terrified. I thought I was a people person too. It's so funny you say that. And I would give a presentation in person to, 5, maybe 15 people, which I thought was a big deal to me. Now I don't at all. But like, so when we started doing this, I was terrified. I was petrified, like is the word. Like people see me today and I see him at ease. And we were joking about this earlier. I said, yeah, after you do about 100 episodes, you feel a little more comfortable doing it. But just to do like turn the camera on and do this was one thing, but to come out here and do what we're doing now was almost an impossibility until I just started doing it. So what I tell people and what I hear all the time is like, well, I'm worried it won't look that good the first time I do it. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to tell you, let me help you with that. It's not going to look that good because you've never done it before. So it shouldn't look that good. But if you look, what I love to do is if you go to someone's like Instagram or TikTok, where you know how you could scroll all the way down to their first stuff, go to mine and look at the first. I mean, it's pathetic. It's awful. It's terrible. I look at it. I keep it on there to remind me, like, you got to start somewhere. Like, you just got to start. And, once you start doing it and you get over that fear, you'll realize it's really not that big of a deal. And shockingly, no one really cares that much about what you do online. My wife and kids, like, they're the last person that, oh, you're on the podcast. Like, they don't know what's going on. They don't care. So, I don't know. You just gotta do it. You just gotta start and do it. And I've had these conversations often. I'm sure you do too. And by the end of the hour consultation or discussion, they're like, it sounds like I just got to do it. And I said, you just got to do it. You just got to turn on the phone and do it. And then you'll improve. It took me years. We've been doing this for about 3 years, but only been really doing content strong for about a year and a month. And but I've done a lot of it. So I've learned a little quicker, but it takes time. And it isn't just all fear. It's all just a thing in our head. It's an imaginary, really.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned a lot of good things there, right? Because at the end of the day, it really is it's all the internal dialogue, right? Like you just look at your phone, just like you're recording a FaceTime video to a family member, right? But you're recording, right? And so it's like physically, there's no additional thing except like, it's the
100%
internal emotional like thing that just kind of holds you back on that side of things. And to your point, right, I think Mr. Beast comes to mind, right? You go look at that guy and what he was 10 years ago, right, prior to his multiple channels of 10 million followers, right? And that guy was nothing special, right? But it's through that repetition of getting there. I think the other thing too, right, is when you start, a lot of people feel like they have to be somebody very specific, right? Or they're going to try and imitate somebody, right? And you just got to be yourself, right?
Yes.
I mean, my wife is big into kind of like aquascaping, right? And she watches this one guy, and every time I hear her listening to him, I'm like, how does that guy have a channel? He's like, and then you do this, and then you do this. And I'm like, man,
exactly.
He's got no charisma, no nothing, right? But I think it's because he's got that like sort of dry thing, but he's also got some dry humor to it. And I think it's just one of those things you're just like, yeah, that guy's just kind of like that guy. And that's why he's kind of funny, right? And so I think you just kind of got to own who you are and what your idiosyncrasies are. Like that's what's going to endear people to you, right? It's
100%.
So if you try to be Grant Cardone, right? Like they're going to be like, whoa, this guy is way too intense and weird and incongruent in what he's trying to do, right? Whereas you're just yourself, people are going to relate to that and they're going to find similarities, right? That's just what we naturally do is we find similarities between us and that person and we relate to them, right?
Yep.
Or we find similarities like in their life, right? If they make an offhanded comment, about a significant other, or maybe a kid who's, doing something wacky or whatever is going on, like those things make you human. And in a world where AI could literally create fake influencers and do all this crazy stuff, right? Like you showing that you're imperfect actually is indicative of you being human and causes people to create a different level of connection with you. I mean, that's kind of how I feel. What would you
better put a timer on this episode because we could talk about this for 10 hours. I love this. So 100% like I'm stamp of approval from me. As far as everything you said, like the people who win and relate online are the people who relate in a human way. They show all the aspects of being human, the fears, the worries, the mistakes. And I think we relate more on our defects than we do on our perfection, which nobody's perfect. So if you're trying to portray you're perfect online, and I see these guys all the time on Insta, they're getting on a jet, it's fake, it's all staged. And I'm like, whatever, but Grant Cardone comes to my mind. I don't know if he's
Yeah,
sick or not, but he,
hey,
he
hashtag Grant Cardone. Let's see if we can get some extra
let's see
views
if we
from
get
that.
let's see if we get some chat going on that. But
Yeah.
and Gary Vee, you mentioned him earlier. I like watching
Yeah.
him. He's really real, and he's the whole document, don't create kind of thing. And he talks about the humanness all the time of that. And the other thing I would say is like, you don't have, and I thought the same thing. You got to be, hey, I'm Tony Bubba. You got to be all flashy and quick and, grab people's attention, but that's not true. And somebody explained it to me, like when I went through sales training, and I used to think that way of salesmen. You got to be this slick kind of, but they equated it to comedians, right? They're successful comedians, but they're all different shapes and size. Like I'm going to totally date myself here, right? So you have the Eddie Murphys or the Chris Rock is one way, and then you've got the Bob Newhart, who's the complete opposite of that. I'm sure nobody watching this probably knows who that is, but he's very dry, but he's hilarious, right? Like he's super funny. So you can be a sales guy, you could be an online guy, like you're saying, the guy your wife watches. My wife does a lot of stuff online. She's got a completely different personality than me, but I think what really shines through is when you're authentic and you're really just there to serve and to help and to provide value. Like that's what we're all about, is providing content that provides value. And when you're genuine with that and you want people to help and you say, hey, look, here's this job we did. We're at so-and-so's house, and this common call we get, and we get it. Like it's expensive to do this, this, and this, but here's 3 options for you. And make sure when you get a contractor, you look for these things in a good contractor. And people can relate to that. They're like, it's genuine.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're actually hitting on a great point, right? Is that it's the documentation, but I think it's also the explaining like what you're doing, right? Like if there's so much that, I'm talking to you, HVAC owner, right? Like there's so much knowledge that you have inside your head that literally, if we tried to document all of it and you talking about all of it, there would be probably thousands of hours of documentable, insightful wisdom without like anything boring in there right now. That being said, there will be lulls in your video. So it's okay, right? If you're kind of sitting there going like, what's that word? Or what am I trying to say? But I say that in the sense that what Tony pointed out is a great situation, right? Like, yes, it's a blown capacitor. You come in, you replace it, right? But explain what you're doing and why you're doing it, how it's helping the customer, why a capacitor is even necessary in the system, right? Like all these things that people are wondering, right? That would be things that they might fight you with on price, right? Being like, well, why does it cost so much, right? And it's like, well, you have to understand, like, yes, the piece of equipment is XYZ, this, that, and the other thing. But when you're installing this thing, you got to make sure that, you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't do this, because it could do this, this, and the other thing, right? I mean, all of that stuff that you have just as rote, like memory and understanding of the whole system, they have no idea, right? And you have to realize as the generation, as the millennial generation and the Gen Zers and XYers or whatever they got going on, coming on, right? Like we are so hungry for information that like we need that, right? And we trust you more if you're willing to be open and transparent about it, as opposed to being like, yeah, you just need that thing fixed and it's going to cost money, right? Most people feel like, well, I'm getting screwed. Like, what are you doing, right? So I love that you say, document and then also share the insight as to like what's going on. So, Tony, let's kind of get a little bit more like tactical here. We're kind of like, 2/3 of the way through, and I really want to give them some like actionable pieces. Like I think we already said, just get started. It's not going to look pretty. Just do it. Right. So let's go to that next thing. Is like thinking maybe through, kind of like, or mapping a strategy, or at least having like, how would you like suggest somebody develop some sort of, thought process behind this so that it is somewhat methodical and planned out. Now, I'm not talking about, get a Google Calendar and put on it that you're going to record 1 video every day, but like maybe just helping them kind of have an arc to the thinking of how they're implementing this. And then maybe talking about, then how do you make sure that it, like all the stuff that you're downloading on your phone, right? How do you make sure that it's like getting out in a way that's helpful without being like overly burdensome? I don't really care if you mention a couple of tools that they can look into, right? Like if there's something in particular you use, right? But yeah, any insight into that, just because I think that would be kind of a hurdle from the technology standpoint. Number one, like, okay, I got it on my phone. Now what do I do with it, right? And the other piece, like, Okay, I just start talking about my jobs or whatnot. So any insight you can share there might be helpful.
Yeah. So I would say don't do what I normally do, which is way overcomplicate things. Try to plan it all out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Keep it very simple.
Yeah.
And if I ever start a consulting business one day for getting people online and helping them do this, here would be my first day. What's your
Love it.
name?
Yep.
Okay. Pull out your phone. Here's a record button. I want you to read this into the phone. My name is yada yada. I do this for a living. Thank you. And then we're going to go upload that to one of the platforms. That would be like my first thing, because until you do that, I have friends who buy a lot. Of course, my other piece of advice: don't go buy some big expensive course, right? Like the people who sell courses are really good at selling courses.
Absolutely.
But I know folks who've spent tens of thousands of dollars and they're on month 8. I'm like, where's your stuff? I don't see any content. Well, we haven't gotten to that yet. I'm like, what are you waiting for? Anyway, so keep it real simple. I would say pick one platform and just start posting reels type videos, portrait style videos that are, less than a minute, and just look for ways to document your day. Hey, I'm Tony. I'm going out to this call today. Here's my van. Here's how I pack it. I'm getting ready for this. Boom, upload it. Because in the beginning, you're really doing it for you. I was going to say not a lot of people are going to see it, but that's today. You don't know, because you could post your first post and have 50,000 people see it. I mean, it's
true.
It's a different lens. That's a whole different conversation about social media today. But like, pick one platform, learn how to record on your phone, and just start uploading stuff. And then one of the things I've learned too is the strategy comes in the doing. It doesn't come in the sitting here and writing it out, because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you're going to like and be. The other part of that is self-awareness. That's the part I was trying to think of a minute ago. Like, some people are good at video. Like, I like doing it because I hate to write. Like, I'm not a good writer. Like GPT chat has been my best friend the past year. Let me just tell you.
Tell me about it.
But so self-awareness, if you're good on video, that's the most engaging thing you could do is video. Keep it short, keep it simple, document your day, pick one platform and start with that and just see where it takes you. That would be my advice to get started. What do you think about that?
Love it. Oh, I love it. And I think the other thing too, I can't remember where I saw this, right? But you can take video and you can turn video into audio and text, right? With audio, you can only turn audio into audio and text, and only with text can you keep it in text, right? So the best thing you can do is create video, because you can turn that into audio and you can turn it into text. And hey, if you're like, what am I going to blog about, right? Or what am I going to generate content? Well, you can actually, there's like AI bots that will take your video and just pull the AI out of it for absolutely free. And there you go. There's your article, right? Send it through Chat GPT, of course, to correct all your grammar.
Clean it up.
You just wrote a blog post, right? And this is
100%
in the day of the life, right? And I don't even want to get in. There's another episode that I have with Tersh Blissett from Service Business Mastery, and he talks about the power of automation and how you can actually automate all this stuff. But again, let's not put the cart before the horse, but there is ways to simplify all this stuff. But to Tony's point, like, you just got to get started. You got to do it a couple of times before you're like, man, that took me way too long, or that was a dumb way to do it that first time, right? So you're only going to get better through the practicing. So
yeah. The other thing I would say to that, let me just add this real quick. Find someone in your niche who's doing it and just kind of watch what they do. Don't copy them, kind of emulate they're doing videos like they're talking about this. I never even thought to talk about that. Content creators pull ideas from each other all the time. And, that's a good way to get started too.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm just going to add on to that real quickly is like, dude, and I don't know, maybe this is just us in the HVAC niche, but like, I have reached out to so many other content creators, and like, you actually get them to respond. And they'll like, so if you've got a question for them, like, they're genuinely just trying to add value to our space. And I have found it really cool that like my connection rate, I would say, with like people I reach out to in our industry is like 80% or north of it. Like, we are all genuinely in this together, trying to make our industry better. And so that's the other thing, right? Like, watch from afar a little bit, right? So you don't ask some really you know,
Mhm.
silly, simple question, right? That you could watch 2 videos from them and really kind of gain for yourself. But like, if you've got an intelligent question, like people are always willing to help and pay it forward, right? Because they probably
Mhm.
they ask a similar question or if another question from somebody else, and we're just trying to keep this whole, you know, train of awesomeness going. Because at some point you will retire and you'll probably get out from it in front of the camera. And why wouldn't it be awesome to have the next generation, you know, picking your brain for that insightful piece? So I love it. Tony, maybe you can talk about, you know, maybe for our more advanced listeners, maybe you can talk about the strategy that you guys are implementing over there at Insight Partners, right? You know, for the commercial space, and
Mhm.
maybe kind of relating that to like what people could be doing at that kind of next level for residential to really kind of, you know, drive things home. And then we'll wrap up with one more question.
Okay, great. Yeah. So one of our core values here at Insight Partners is working together, we're stronger. So our
Mm-hmm.
2 online platforms, we have a podcast and we have a YouTube channel. Our goal, our mission is to educate and empower the HVAC community. Like that's our goal. So we don't use those channels. You know, you will see some products on there, some product selling on there, but 80% of it is, and this is a good ratio to know, like 80% is give,
Mm-hmm.
educate, try to help, and then, you know, 20%, hey man, we sell equipment too. Give us a holler if you need something. We
Right.
gotta pay the bills around here too, you know. But
Yeah.
but keep it in that ratio. You know, not a lot of people are going to tune in if you're always just pushing a product. You got to have these features, and we're better than A, B, and C. You know, it's not about that. It's about providing value, like 100%, and it builds the Insight Partners brand, because we truly do try to live by the working together we're stronger. And I personally believe that in my career, my personal life, and I'm fortunate enough to work for a company that the leadership believes that. And the other thing too is I'm very lucky here because we have a leadership who sees the importance of this, like sees getting out there, like just what I'm doing here today. Like we're talking about our
Yeah.
company, we're trying to help other contractors. It falls in line with the educate and empower the HVAC community. This falls in line with that. So yeah, so I would say, yeah. So I don't know. Did that answer the question? I forgot what the question was already. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. No, so I was just curious, like, you know, for somebody who's maybe operating their brand or their business at a different level in terms of
Oh yeah,
social,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, how can they do that, you know, whether they're commercial or residential, and do that smartly? And I think you just gave some great examples
Yeah.
of that, right? Is thinking about that ratio, because, and I think in all honesty, most people would lean to the 100% give. They feel like that's all I got to do is give. It's like, no, it's important to bring up the fact that, like, hey, by the way, you know, if you're in the XYZ Florida area and you're looking for HVAC repair, like, I
Love
have
to help you.
a business that serves these surrounding areas. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, because you
No,
also
no.
might not get, you know, that person might not be somebody who's in your area, but they might have a grandma or they might have a cousin or whatever that's over in that area, and be, you know, and next time they're out, be like, man, I listen to this guy from your neck of the woods all the time, so and so ABC, right? Well,
Mhm.
who knows who they're going to call, right? Potentially you, right? So sorry,
That's
Tony,
right.
continue.
No, no, no. That was great. So yeah, so bringing value is just the key. You know, good marketing. You know, marketing is not sales. You know, sales is about making a conversion, which is
Yep.
important to sell or to get a contract or whatever. Marketing is about creating an experience, and that experience involves trust. It involves building a relationship, and you could do that online. I know people I've been with online for 2 years. I feel like they're best friends. I've never met them in person. It's crazy, but you can really build a relationship with people that way. And you know, you're trying to bring value to a person to bring them from point A to point B, whatever journey they're in, right? So if it's a
Yep.
homeowner you're trying to educate, or not, in our case, mechanical engineers, like we do tons of content geared towards mechanical engineers. Typically, the online stuff is more general and more basic. Hey, you want a deeper dive? Call us. We'll come to your office and do. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's,
Yep.
you know, so that's kind of how we roll with that. But yeah, bringing value, thinking about it from the consumers. Why is someone going to watch this? Why does somebody care? Because really, people don't care that much about, you know, everybody's in their own head. They care about their bills and
Yep.
their status with their company. You know, how am I going to make myself look good and my company look good? You know, so you got to think of it in terms of, it's got to be customer centric, not you centric. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? I'm explaining
Mhm.
that well, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, just to kind of like maybe shed even more light on that, is like the videos that you're making,
Mhm.
right? Is I think some people can shy away. It's like, well, if I explain everything that I do, well, then people are just going to do it themselves and they're not going to hire me. It's like, you have to understand, like, that is the small minority of people who are like literally watching your videos to like learn things so that they can do them themselves, right? The vast majority just want somebody to do it. They just want somebody they trust to do something that they feel is complicated or potentially, dangerous, right? And so I think also, not feeling like, you're giving away the farm, but really you're just educating your customer, because then too, they're going to want to engage at the dining room table with you when you're walking through options about what they could do, whether it's, a temporary repair, or it's like, hey, this is a whole system replacement that's needed, right? There's just a different level of trust there. So yeah, I love it.
100%.
Awesome. Tony, anything you have to add before I ask you my last final question?
Well, we went just real quick to that. We went through are we giving away the farm thing. Here's what we've learned. You're probably not going to say anything that's not online already.
True. That's
5 million times, first of all. And, it just helps people. You could write a manual on how to change an HVAC unit and no one's going to probably go do it. Right. Like I could write a manual on how we do our online thing and no one's probably going to go do it. But, so there's that, like, you're not really giving away, you're just building a relationship where other people are not. So
yeah, love it. And that's the key, right? Is building that relationship in today's, that's the one thing that an AI can't build, I guess.
Right.
I hope, right? I don't
Maybe.
know. You watch that movie, Her, right? And you just say, yeah, it's like, it's crazy, right? So, awesome. With that, Tony, I got one last question for you. I don't think I warned you. But what you came here, right? You wanted to share, you wanted to give, wisdom and value to my audience, from which I really thank you. What's the question that you wish I had asked you that I have not asked you yet?
I don't know. I guess how did I get to where I'm at here, like from a salesman to an online marketing guy? I don't know if we talked about that a whole lot, but that's something I love to talk about. So, if that's okay, I'll take that.
Yeah, let's hear it, man. I think because a lot of people, like you're saying, who are probably listening to this are going, dude, I am not a guy in front of a camera, right? So maybe this will be helpful for their journey. So yeah, share away.
I was not that guy either 3 years ago. So, one of the things I've learned, the best career advice I ever got, I've read a bunch of how to be successful books and all this stuff. But one guy, how some people will say something at the right moment in life where you just hear it. Yeah. You've heard it a million times, but you really hear it like in the heart. So he told me, if you want to be successful, just go to work and look for ways to be of service. Right. So I took that to heart, and I came to, I started doing that in my career life. And when COVID hit and the Insight Partners thing hit, when COVID hit and we started getting online, is what I meant to say. I had a little bit of experience with that. So my boss called me and he said, hey, you mind doing this? Even though I was terrified, I said yes, because I wanted to help the company. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's in the service that you grow. And if you're in the service when you don't want to do it and it's fearful, you'll grow even more. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That's been my experience. So I love that transformation, how that's happened. I can't go watch my earlier videos. I'm like, Tony, and I'm literally like shaking. My knees are shaking. You can't see them under the table, but so that's always a fun thing for me to talk about, because I've learned, like, the more fear you face, the more you walk through, the more you challenge yourself. You won't grow if you don't do that. Like, I won't grow if I keep doing the same thing. Like this live show here, I had almost no, fear about doing it. A few months ago, it would have been different. I would have been very scared to do it, but now it's like, whatever, I'm human. I'm going to say things that are dumb and I'm going to look back and make mistakes, but that's okay. Like, that's just part of the deal. So anyway, I appreciate you having me and let me have that last question. That was fun.
Of course, Tony. And, I think it's funny, right? Like, this was my first live stream, and yeah, I was terrified, but I think sometimes it's like, that's the feeling that makes you feel alive. Right. And I think so often, we, and I can't even remember how this, somebody said this, to me, but I just, I heard it, right. Is it like this aggressive progression towards a life of complete comfort, right, is usually what kills you. If you think about, like, as you get older, right, we're always trying to avoid any like pain. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too soft, it's too, or whatever, it's too squishy, I don't know, whatever. The idea is that we get to this point in our life and we all of a sudden we just want to kind of like live in this bubble of comfort. In reality, that's what actually makes you like weak, as opposed to kind of this whole mentality of how do you become anti-fragile and really kind of, being resilient, right? So
100%.
Anyway, there's some food for thought to ponder. So awesome. As we kind of wrap it up, Tony, if somebody does want to get a hold of you, right, says, oh shoot, like you got to talk to somebody in my company to figure some of this stuff out or what have you, right? I mean, I know you're not selling any services, right? But if somebody does want to reach out, pick your brain a little bit more in depth than what we've shared here, what's the best way to get a hold of you and get in contact?
Yeah. So Insight Partners on LinkedIn is a great way to get a hold of us as a company. We've got a lot of products and services in the HVAC commercial business, and we have sister companies throughout the whole East Coast. So we're glad to help with anything to do with HVAC, commercial HVAC. So Insight Partners on LinkedIn, and then insightUSA.com is our website. So
awesome. And then how about you, Tony, if they want to pick your brain?
Sure. Tony Mormino on LinkedIn.
Perfect.
Come follow, connect. I love building connections too. So yeah.
Love it. Awesome. Well, that's a wrap, everybody. Another episode of the Reputation Igniter podcast in the books. Again, our focus here is on serving you, the HVAC business owner, especially in this world in which we live. For whatever reason, mainstream media wants to demonize us entrepreneurs. And all I'm trying to do is encourage you, create a community around you that gets us moving in the right direction and realizing the power and the impact of the businesses we have. Not only are we serving our communities, but we're providing for our employees. And of course, we're just trying to keep bringing home that bacon and keeping the bread on the table. And so we thank you so much for all your service, everything that you do. Again, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. Write a review if you feel so inclined, as that's a great way to showcase that the podcast is adding value to your life. And lastly, the question is if you just share it with one more person that maybe they're in a mastermind, maybe you meet them in an expo, something like that, to just kind of pass the love and the knowledge along makes a big difference. So with that, we'll end here and we'll see you next time.